I've always been proud of the life I've built, though there are moments when it feels like I'm standing at the edge of a world that doesn't quite understand me. My name is Henry Turner, and I'm 45 years old. For the past 23 years, I've worked as a mechanic in a small town just outside of Portland. It's not the kind of job that gets you noticed in fancy circles, but it's honest work, and it keeps the lights on. I fix engines, repair brakes, replace transmissions. Whatever keeps the cars on the road and the customers coming back. It's a life built on hard work, sweat, and the satisfaction of knowing I'm good at what I do. I've never been the type to chase after accolades or recognition. What I care about is putting in a day's work and being there for my family when they need me. My son, Eli, is the complete opposite of me in many ways. While I've spent my days getting my hands dirty, Eli was always more interested in fixing problems with his mind. From the time he was a kid, I knew he was different. Always fascinated by math and computers, always tinkering with things in a way that made sense to him. By the time he was in high school, he was teaching himself to code, solving problems I couldn't even begin to understand. It wasn't long before Eli set his sights on becoming an engineer. He went off to college, worked his tail off, and within a few short years, became one of the youngest partners at a tech firm. I couldn't have been prouder. I wasn't used to seeing a world of suits and boardrooms. I was more comfortable with grease under my fingernails and the sound of a car engine purring after a good tune-up. But Eli was different. He had the kind of drive that came with ambition and brains, and I couldn't help but admire it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that our worlds were as far apart as they could be. Eli had always been a good son, but as he moved further into that high-powered world of tech, I began to feel like I was losing him to a different reality. A reality where people judged you by your degrees, your salary, and who you knew, not by your character or how hard you worked. Eli met Emily 3 years ago. She was beautiful, smart, and everything I'd never been. Emily came from a family of old money. Her father, Gregory, was a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, and her mother, Marissa, had a doctorate in economics. Emily had a master's degree from Stanford, and she worked in finance. I could see the way her family looked at me when we met. They were polite, sure, but their eyes spoke a different language. I wasn't a man of letters. I didn't know what a hedge fund was, and I wasn't sure how to make small talk about the stock market. I could tell they saw me for what I was, a mechanic from a small town, with no formal education and no lofty career prospects. But Eli was happy. He loved Emily, and I loved seeing him smile like that. It was the first time in a long while I'd seen him so at ease with someone. The wedding invitation came on a warm summer afternoon. I'd been avoiding it for days, letting it sit on the kitchen counter while I tried to figure out how I felt. I wasn't afraid of the wedding itself, but I was afraid of what it symbolized. This wasn't just Eli getting married. It was the beginning of him stepping into a world I couldn't quite reach, a world that didn't really have a place for someone like me. A world of power lunches, business deals, and status that I'd never know. I wasn't sure I belonged there. Finally, I opened the envelope and saw the grand details of the event. The wedding would be held at a country club in the city, with a ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers and guests that were more business executives than family. Eli had made it big, but I felt the weight of that achievement like a shadow hanging over me. He was about to marry into a world that valued things I couldn't provide. But I knew I had to go. It was his wedding, after all. And even if I didn't quite fit in, I had to show up. I rented a tuxedo that didn't quite fit right and got into my old truck, praying it wouldn't break down on the way there. When I arrived, the valet took my truck, likely the only vehicle there that didn't belong, and I walked into the ballroom holding my tux like a piece of borrowed clothing. I felt out of place, as if the room could tell I didn't belong. I was led to a seat near the back of the room, far from the front, where Eli would be sitting with Emily and the rest of their guests. I looked around at the people surrounding me, lawyers, doctors, and financiers, all of them dressed in fancy clothes, all of them seeming like they had been born to live in this world. I wasn't sure what I was doing there, but I smiled anyway, doing my best to hide the unease creeping up inside me. The ceremony itself was beautiful, sure, But as I watched Eli standing there, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was I proud? Yes. But I also felt the stark divide between us growing wider, and it was only going to get worse from here. The ceremony was everything I'd expected. The flowers were perfect, the aisle was lined with white roses, and Eli looked every bit the handsome young man I had raised, standing tall and proud at the altar. He had his mother's eyes, but when I looked at him, I saw so much of myself in the way he carried himself, quietly confident, always determined. I knew that whatever path he'd chosen, he would make it work. I had no doubt about that. I kept my eyes on him as Emily walked down the aisle. She looked every bit the picture of grace, her smile bright and sincere. As I watched them together, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet pride. He had found someone who understood him in ways I never could. Emily was everything I wasn't: educated, well-spoken, and from a family that had everything money could buy. And yet, here she was, about to marry my son. There was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place in this world. But I pushed it aside. This was his moment. I would stand by him, no matter where it took him. The vows were exchanged, and everything felt right. My boy was all grown up. I could almost hear the sound of him running around the house as a kid, playing with toy cars and begging me to teach him how to fix things. I remember those days well. It wasn't easy raising him on my own after his mother left, but I never once regretted it. We made it work. I taught him everything I knew: how to change the oil in a car, how to repair a leaky faucet, and how to always stand by your word. I wasn't perfect. Hell, I wasn't even close, but I did my best. But as the ceremony ended and the reception began, I could feel the weight of the world bearing down on me. I'd been invited to the wedding, yes, but as soon as I stepped into that grand ballroom, I felt it. The unspoken divide between the world I'd known and the one Eli was stepping into. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, sizing me up, wondering who I was and why I was there. They all had degrees, power, and status. What did I have? A mechanic's apron and a steady paycheck. Not much to impress a crowd like this. The reception hall was a palace in comparison to the place I called home. Marble floors, gold accents, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, each one more elaborate than the next. I could feel the heat of the polished silverware and crystal glasses around me, their beauty all designed to make you feel small. I looked down at my own nameplate. Henry Turner Auto Mechanic. Small town dad. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to read it again, but my eyes couldn't help themselves. Small town dad. That was how they saw me. I wasn't a father. I wasn't a man who had sacrificed everything for his son. No. I was just a mechanic from a small town who didn't know what it was like to live a life that mattered to them. I glanced around the table. The others seated near me were from the same town, people I'd known all my life. My brother Paul, his wife Karen, and a few neighbors who had come to support Eli and me. They didn't belong here either. They didn't fit into the world of high society and wealth that Emily's family had brought with them. We were the others, the working class people they allowed in because they had to. It felt like they were letting us sit at the back of the room as if we didn't matter. And that's when I realized how far Eli had come, how far we both had come, and how far I was from the world he was entering. I felt the eyes of the guests around me. I could feel the judgment, the way their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. They were too polite to say anything, but it was there, hanging in the air like a thick fog. That's when I saw Gregory, Emily's father, leaning in to whisper something to a colleague, his eyes flicking over to me for just a moment. He raised his glass, a silent acknowledgement of my presence. But it wasn't the kind of acknowledgement I wanted. It was the kind of acknowledgement someone gives to a guest they didn't invite but had to let in. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't welcome here. Marissa, Emily's mother, didn't even try to hide the way she looked at me. Her eyes were filled with something I couldn't name. Contempt, maybe, or just simple disapproval. It didn't matter. I wasn't a part of her world. I knew that. But I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to be treated like this at my own son's wedding. Henry, my brother Paul whispered, "What's going on? Did you see that?" I looked down at the nameplate again, the words still staring back at me like a slap in the face. "Yeah, I saw it," I said quietly. "It's what they think of me." Jim, sitting across from me, took the nameplate in his hands, his expression hardening. That's cold, Henry. Just plain cold. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to make a scene, but everything inside me was boiling over. These people I didn't know, people who didn't know me, were telling me who I was, reducing me to a job title, to a label, to something far smaller than what I had spent my life trying to be. And then I saw Emily's father, Gregory, leaning in to whisper again. He raised his glass once more, this time toasting me in the most dismissive way. A mocking gesture, an acknowledgement of the lowly mechanic sitting in the back of the room. And that's when it broke me. I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor. I didn't care anymore. Dad, wait. Eli's voice called out, his face as pale as I'd ever seen it. What's wrong? His eyes were wide with confusion, but as soon as he saw the nameplate in my hand, his expression shifted. His eyes turned hard, and I saw the fury building in them. I didn't want to ruin his wedding, but at that moment, I couldn't stay seated. I had to do something. Anything. This, I said, my voice tight. This is what they think of me. Eli stood up immediately, his eyes wide with shock, then narrowed with a fire I'd never seen before. Dad, what is this? Who did this? He demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of confusion and anger. The whole room seemed to pause, their eyes shifting between us. The chattering slowed, the music softened, and all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. I was no longer part of the backdrop. I was the center of attention. The anger started to rise in me, but I tried to control it. I didn't want to make a scene. Not at his wedding. Not like this. I looked around at the guests, their polite smiles now almost suffocating. They were staring at me, and I realized just how deeply I didn't belong in this world. The wealth, the power, the Ivy League degrees, none of it mattered in this moment. It was like I was being judged for everything I wasn't, rather than everything I'd done. Eli, though, wasn't going to stand by and let it happen. He looked at me for a moment, then turned his gaze to the head table, where Emily's family was seated. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the muscles tightening with the effort of holding back. He raised his voice, calm but fierce, loud enough that the entire room could hear. Emily, we need to talk, he said, his words slicing through the murmurs like a knife. The room fell dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Emily stood up from her seat, her face full of confusion and worry. She looked over at me, then at Eli, and for a moment I saw that same kindness in her eyes. But it quickly faded when she saw the nameplate in Eli's hand. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding, then to horror. Eli, what's wrong? She asked, her voice trembling. He didn't hesitate. Did you know about this? He held up the nameplate, the words auto mechanic, small-town dad glaring at her. Did you know they put this here for me? Did you know they were going to humiliate my father like this? Emily's face drained of color as she glanced at the nameplate and then back at her parents. Her lips parted in shock, but she stammered. Oh my God, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know, Eli. I would never. I could see the pain in her eyes, the genuine regret that she hadn't known. But it wasn't enough. It didn't change what was happening right here, right now. The damage was done. Eli's gaze didn't soften. It hardened, and I could see the raw anger in his eyes, the fierce protection he felt for me. You didn't know, but your family did, he said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. You didn't know, but they wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly who my father was. Some blue-collar mechanic who doesn't belong in their world. The room was still silent, everyone watching as the tension built between Eli and Emily's parents. Marissa, Emily's mother, stood up slowly. Her eyes were cold, but there was something else there, too. An arrogance, a superiority that I couldn't ignore. Eli, darling, please, don't make a scene, she said, trying to smooth things over with a forced smile. It was just a little joke, a way to lighten the mood. Surely you can see the humor in it. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears as the words came out of her mouth. A joke? A joke? Did she really think I would just let this slide as if it didn't matter? Eli's face turned red with anger. A joke? He repeated, his voice growing louder, cutting through the silence like a blade. You think calling my father small-town dad is funny? You think humiliating the man who raised me, who sacrificed his entire life for me, is a joke? His voice cracked with emotion, but he stood firm, every word ringing out with the kind of conviction I had always hoped for in him. I felt my chest tighten, my throat dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but it was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Eli was speaking for both of us, and he was doing it in a way I had never seen him do before. He wasn't backing down, and I wasn't about to tell him to stop. I don't care about your wealth, your education, or your power, Eli continued, his voice steady now. What matters to me is that my father loved me every damn day of my life. He didn't care that he didn't have fancy degrees or a high-paying job. He cared about me. He showed up. And that's more than any of you can ever offer me. So, no, I'm not going to sit here and let you make a joke out of who he is. He's my father. And I'll be damned if I let you disrespect him, especially not today. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in Emily's eyes. She turned to her parents, her face pleading, but the damage had been done. Her mother's gaze shifted to her father, and for a moment, I thought they might actually apologize. But Gregory's face remained stoic. He cleared his throat, as if trying to salvage some dignity in front of his colleagues. Eli, this is ridiculous, Gregory said, his voice tight. You need to understand, this was never meant to be taken so seriously. We've welcomed you into our family, and we've done more than enough for you. We've supported you in your career, but we're not going to apologize for a harmless joke. Eli shook his head. A harmless joke? You've got no idea what respect means, do you? And you want to teach me how to succeed? You want to teach me how to live in this world? This is what I'm supposed to learn from you? I could feel Eli's words hitting harder than anything I had ever said. This was his battle now, his stand against everything I had always silently endured. The boy I raised to fix engines had just fixed a much bigger problem. He'd stood up for the man who had loved him and showed him the value of showing up, of integrity, of love. Dad, let's go, Eli said, his voice now calm but firm. I saw the pain in his eyes, but there was something else too. Relief, maybe. Relief that he had made his choice, that he had stood up for what was right. I can't let you do this, I whispered, looking at him, my heart aching. But Eli was resolute. Yes, you can, he said softly. We're leaving. And with that, we walked out of the ballroom. As we left, I could hear the whispers start, the murmur of people who had watched the whole thing unfold. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that Eli had chosen me over everything else. And in that moment, I knew he had made the right choice. We left the reception in silence, the cool night air hitting us as soon as we stepped outside the grand ballroom. Eli's arm was around me, his grip strong but comforting. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I didn't know if I was more relieved or angry, if I was proud or ashamed. It all felt like too much, like a weight had just been lifted off my chest, but there was still a gnawing emptiness inside. We just walked out of Eli's wedding, his wedding, the moment that was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. I was proud of him, no doubt about that. But as we stood there in the parking lot, the sounds of the wedding still echoing behind us, I couldn't help but think about the mess we just made. We shouldn't have done that, Eli, I finally said, my voice quiet but shaky. This isn't what I wanted for you. I didn't want you to have to choose between me and them. I didn't want you to walk away from everything you've worked for. Eli didn't look at me at first. He was staring out across the parking lot, his face hard and unreadable. It wasn't the anger I'd seen in his eyes earlier, but something more profound, something raw, like he was finally seeing the world for what it was. Dad, he said softly, turning to me, this isn't about them. This is about you. You're my father. Nothing they do, nothing they say can change that. I felt my heart swell in my chest. His words were like a balm on a wound I didn't even realize was still open. I had never doubted his love, but in that moment, hearing him speak those words with such conviction, I realized how much this had all affected him too. It wasn't just me who had been hurt by the things Emily's family said. It was him too. And yet, despite everything, he was standing here beside me, not because of the nameplate, not because of the money or the prestige. He was standing beside me because I was his father, and that was enough. We didn't talk much on the drive home. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the walk out, the way Emily's family had looked at me like I was a problem they couldn't quite figure out, the way I had felt like an outsider in my own son's life. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling that I had somehow messed up Eli's future. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the lights from our house flickering in the distance. Our house, the one I had built with my own hands, the one Eli had grown up in. It was small, sure, but it was ours. And in that moment, it felt like the only place I belonged. The weight of the night felt lighter here, like maybe, just maybe, we had made the right decision. We walked into the house without saying much, but as soon as I closed the door behind us, Eli turned to me. I can't believe what they did, Dad. They made me choose between my past and my future, between you and them. But I couldn't do it. Not like that. Not when it's you who's been here for me every single day. I'm sorry, Eli, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't want you to feel like you had to choose. You didn't make me choose, Dad, he said, his voice steady. They did. I didn't want to walk away from my own wedding, but I had to. For you. For what you've done for me. They'll never get it. But I get it, and I'm never going to forget what you've taught me. That family, real family, doesn't care about degrees or money or any of that. It's about showing up. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected him to be so sure of himself, so certain that walking away from all of that was the right thing to do. I thought I'd be the one teaching him about life and what it meant to stand your ground. But in this moment, he was teaching me. Eli's voice softened as he added, "You taught me that, Dad. You taught me that love is the most important thing, that showing up every day, no matter what, is what makes you a man. It doesn't matter if I'm in some fancy tech company or working in a garage, I'm still your son, and I wouldn't be here without you." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him as not just my son, but as someone who had become his own man. Strong, sure, and unafraid to make the hard choices. The weight of what had happened seemed to lift just a little bit. "Maybe we didn't do things the way we thought we would," I said quietly. "But you did the right thing, Eli. You did the right thing by me." He smiled then, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in a long time, the kind that reached all the way to his eyes. It was the smile of a son who knew he had made the hardest choice of his life, but also the right one. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." We sat in silence for a while, just taking in the peace of the moment. The world outside was still spinning, and the drama of the wedding would likely continue without us. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Eli and I were on the same page, that we were in this together. A few weeks passed, and we didn't hear much from Emily's family. The fallout from the wedding was still rippling through their world, but it had settled into a quiet, uneasy silence. Emily had tried to reach out a few times, but Eli was firm in his decision. He couldn't pretend anymore, and he didn't want to. His life was about honesty, about loyalty, and about being true to who he was. Finally, one evening, Eli came into the living room, a grin on his face. "I think it's time to do this the right way," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, not sure where he was going with it. "We're going to have a small ceremony," he said. "Just us. Just the people who really matter." It wasn't the grand wedding they had planned, but it was real. It was true. And in that moment, I knew this was the start of something better. Something more important than any wedding reception could ever be. The idea of a small, intimate ceremony wasn't something I'd ever imagined for Eli. I had always pictured the grand weddings people like Emily's family throw, complete with expensive venues, long guest lists, and extravagant decor. But after everything that happened at the reception, something about Eli's suggestion felt so much more right, so much more real. He had made his choice, and now this was his way of embracing the life he wanted to build, without all the pretense that had surrounded the first wedding. Weeks passed, and the quiet tension between Eli and Emily's family continued. They'd sent messages, tried to smooth things over, but Eli wasn't interested in their apologies. "I don't need them to apologize," he told me one evening. "I just need them to understand that family isn't about money or status. It's about showing up like you taught me. And they'll never get that." I nodded, proud of the man he had become. He wasn't just standing up for me. He was standing up for what he believed in, for everything I'd taught him about what really matters. Eli and Emily decided to hold the ceremony at my brother Paul's house, a simple backyard wedding with just the people who had always been there for us. No grand ballroom, no overpriced champagne, just people who cared about them. It felt like the right way to start their lives together, on their terms, not anyone else's. The night before the wedding, I found myself sitting on the porch, looking out over the yard as I thought about everything that had led to this point. I thought about Eli as a boy, how he used to sit on the porch with me while I worked on the truck, asking endless questions about how things worked. I remember the days when it was just the two of us, trying to make sense of the world without much help from anyone else. Back then, I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. I didn't have the answers, and I didn't have all the resources I wanted to give him. But I did have love. I had patience. I had the ability to show up every day, and that, as Eli had taught me, was all that really mattered. Paul came out and joined me on the porch, handing me a cold beer. "You doing all right?" he asked, sitting down beside me. "Yeah, just thinking about everything," I said, taking the beer from him. "How we got here, it doesn't feel real." "It's real," Paul said, smiling. "Your boy's growing up, Henry, and he's doing it the right way." I nodded, but the weight of the past few weeks hit me again. There was a part of me that still wondered if I'd done enough, if I'd shown Eli what he needed to know to face the world. But looking at Paul, seeing how proud he was of Eli too, I realized that all those years of working my ass off to provide for him, even if I didn't have everything I thought he deserved, had made a difference. I'd taught him the most important lessons I could: how to be a good man, how to stand by your word, how to love fiercely. The day of the ceremony was as simple as it was beautiful. The sun was shining, but there was a breeze in the air that kept everything cool. I saw Emily's parents standing at the edge of the backyard when we arrived. They were polite, cordial even, but there was no denying the awkwardness between us. I knew they didn't understand why Eli had made the choice he did. They probably still didn't get why he'd walked away from the life they'd tried to build for him. But Eli had made it clear. This wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the life he'd built with Emily, the life that mattered to him. And that life was here, in this yard, with the people who loved him most. The ceremony was short, just the two of them exchanging vows under a small arch made of wildflowers. No frills, no long speeches, just two people promising to stand by each other, no matter what. As Eli spoke his vows, I could feel the lump in my throat tighten. He wasn't just making promises to Emily, he was making them to himself, to the man he had become. A man who stood up for what was right, a man who chose love over status, and a man who valued family above all else. When it was my turn to speak, I could barely get the words out. "Eli," I started, my voice thick with emotion. "I've spent your whole life trying to teach you what it means to be a man. I hope I did all right. I know I wasn't always the father you deserved, but I've always tried my best. You've become something I'm proud of, and that's all I ever wanted." Eli stepped up beside me, his eyes filled with emotion. "You've done more than all right, Dad," he said, his voice soft but steady. "You've taught me everything I needed to know about being a good man. It's not about the money or the fancy degrees. It's about showing up every day. You showed me that, and I'll never forget it." I didn't know what to say after that. What could I say? I'd always feared I wasn't enough for him, that I couldn't provide the life he deserved, the life his mother wanted for him. But in that moment, standing beside him as he made his vows to Emily, I knew that I had given him something far more important than any amount of money or education could ever buy. I had given him love. I had shown him what it meant to be present, to be real, and to never give up on the people you care about. The reception was simple, just a few close friends and family sitting around a table, eating cake and talking about the future. No one cared about how much money was spent or who had the best suit. All that mattered was that we were there, together, supporting Eli and Emily as they started their new life. As the night wore on, I sat back, watching my son and his new wife dance under the string lights. I could hear the sound of laughter, the music, the warmth of the evening, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was exactly as it should be. The world outside may have its standards and its judgments, but here, in this small backyard with the people who mattered most, Eli had found his happiness. And that was enough for both of us. The days after Eli and Emily's small wedding were quieter, almost surreal. We'd traded the grandiosity of a fancy reception for the simplicity of a backyard celebration, and somehow it felt like everything had come full circle. The noise of the wedding, well, the noise of everything, had faded into a peaceful stillness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just in Eli, but in me too. I found myself replaying the events of the wedding, thinking about the things Eli had said. It was strange, but it almost felt like he was teaching me more than I'd taught him. He'd been firm in his decision, unwavering in the face of all the pressures that came from his in-laws, from the world around him. And as much as I had wanted him to avoid conflict, to find a way to bridge the gap between us and Emily's family, I realized I couldn't have been prouder of the man he had become. A few days later, I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking my coffee and listening to the hum of the neighborhood. The world outside still carried on like nothing had happened, like the wedding and the moments leading up to it were just another blip in the distance. But for me, everything felt different now. Maybe it was just the weight of what Eli had done, the choice he had made to stand up for me, for us. But something about it had left an imprint on me. I was no longer the same father I had been before. Not that I had changed who I was, but the realization that Eli understood the value of family, loyalty, and love in such a profound way gave me a new sense of purpose. It was like he'd taken everything I'd taught him and made it his own, not just for himself, but for us. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wasn't surprised to see it was Eli. He'd been calling more often lately, just checking in, chatting about life, making sure everything was good. It felt comforting, like we were in sync. "Hey, Dad." His voice came through clear, strong. "I've been thinking." "Uh-oh," I said, chuckling, not sure where this was going. I know it's been a lot lately with the wedding and everything he started, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. But I want to do something. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's something about all that grandeur that just doesn't sit right with me. I've been talking to Emily about it. I want to help people who need it, not just those who are already set. I leaned back in my chair, trying to follow his train of thought. "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Well, you know how I've been working in tech, right? But I keep thinking about all the guys at your shop, all the folks who work hard every day, and they don't get recognized for it. They don't have the luxury of showing up to a ballroom dressed in a tux with people pouring champagne into their glasses. And I can't just sit here and keep pretending that all that means more than the people who actually make the world run, the ones who do the real work." I let his words sink in, feeling the weight of them settle in my chest. "So, what are you thinking?" I asked, already suspecting where this might be going. "I want to help those guys," Eli said. "I want to give back, not just for people who already have it all. I want to start something that helps working class people, folks who don't get the recognition they deserve, people who sacrifice, who show up every day, just like you did for me." I felt the lump rise in my throat, an unexpected swell of emotion that I wasn't prepared for. "Eli, you don't have to do that. You've already done more than enough. I'm proud of you. You've got your career, your life ahead of you. Don't go complicating it with things you don't need to." He chuckled softly, and I could hear the determination in his voice. "Dad, I need to do this. It's not about making money. It's about giving back. It's about showing people that their work matters, that they matter. You taught me that. You showed me that love, loyalty, and hard work are what make a person, not what's in their bank account or their job title. And I want to help make sure other people know that too." I was silent for a moment, just taking in what he had said. This was my son, the man who had walked away from wealth and status to stand by me. The same man who had built a tech career from the ground up and was now thinking about giving back, about lifting others up the way he had been raised. It wasn't just about taking what he could get. It was about making a real difference in the lives of people who worked hard but often went unnoticed. "That sounds like a hell of a plan, son," I said finally, my voice thick with pride. "I don't know if I ever told you, but you've already taught me something too. I spent years thinking I wasn't enough, that I couldn't give you everything. But look at you. You've got it all figured out. And it's not because of what I gave you in terms of things. It's because of what I showed you." That's what matters. Yeah, Dad, he said, his voice soft now. You showed me that character counts more than any title or paycheck. You didn't have much, but you gave me the one thing that really matters: your love, your time, your presence. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't perfect. Far from it. But hearing him talk like that, seeing how much he'd taken what I'd given him and turned it into something beautiful, it was more than I could have ever hoped for. I'm proud of you, Eli, I said quietly. You've made me proud every day of your life, even when you didn't know it. And whatever you decide to do, I'll be behind you, every step of the way. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Eli there, smiling, knowing that he had my support, my full support. Thanks, Dad. That means everything. And as we said our goodbyes, I sat back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. I'd spent so much of my life worrying about whether I'd done enough for him, whether I'd been enough. But in that moment, I knew that I had. Eli had figured it out on his own. He was making the world a better place, not by what he had, but by what he was willing to give. And as I sat there reflecting on the journey we'd both been on, I realized something. Eli had already given me everything I needed, and I had given him everything he needed too. What more could a father ask for? The weeks that followed Eli's decision to give back and focus on helping others felt like the start of something new. Not just for him, but for me too. Watching him begin to carve his own path, one that was less about the spotlight and more about making a real difference, was humbling. It wasn't just a shift in his career or his intentions. It was a shift in the way he saw the world and, by extension, the way I saw him. I had always known he was special. From the moment he was born, there was something about him that made me believe he was destined for more. But I never imagined he'd go beyond the high-rise offices, the fancy tech contracts, and the things people usually chase. Instead, he was chasing something deeper: purpose. And in doing so, he was showing me, without even realizing it, that there was more to life than what we've always been told to pursue. One evening, a few months after that conversation, Eli called again. His voice had that excitement in it that I knew well, like when he was a kid, bouncing off the walls after solving a particularly tricky math problem. "Dad, I did it," he said, his words tumbling out faster than I could process. "Did what?" I asked, my heart picking up pace with his enthusiasm. "I've set up a nonprofit," he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "It's for workers, people like the guys at your shop, people who don't get enough recognition. I'm going to help provide resources for them. Career development, training, even small loans for things like tools or equipment. I want to make sure no one feels invisible the way you felt at that wedding." I sat there, stunned. "Eli, that's incredible. I didn't know you were thinking this big." "I wasn't sure where it would go, but I knew it was something I had to do," he said. "And the best part is that it's not just me. Emily's on board too. She's been a huge help, especially with the legal stuff. And you know what? Some of the guys from your shop are already showing interest. They're starting to see that it's possible to take what they already know and make it work for them." I had to swallow the lump in my throat. "Son, I can't even tell you how proud I am. This is exactly the kind of thing I wish I could have done. But hearing you say it, knowing it's happening, well, it's more than I could ever ask for." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and when Eli spoke again, his voice softened. "Dad, it's because of you. You taught me that it's not about what you have, it's about what you give. And you've been giving your whole life, even when it didn't feel like it was enough. I've just been trying to find a way to do the same, to make sure people know their worth, even when the world might tell them they don't have it." I couldn't answer right away. I was too choked up, too overwhelmed by the weight of his words. Here was my son, the man I had raised, doing more than I ever could have imagined, not just building something for himself, but building something that would help lift others. The same man who had once been embarrassed by the world I came from was now using everything he had learned to give others a chance at dignity and opportunity. "Eli, you're doing more than just building a business. You're changing lives," I said, finally finding my voice. "You've shown me that what matters isn't the stuff you accumulate or the titles you hold. It's what you do for others, how you make them feel seen and heard. And I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become. The rest of the conversation went by in a blur. We talked about the logistics of the nonprofit, about his plans for the future, and about how Emily was helping to navigate the legal side of things. I listened, amazed at the way Eli had taken the challenges of his own upbringing, challenges that I had felt guilty about for so long, and turned them into something powerful. He wasn't just helping people like me, he was changing the system, one step at a time. And somehow, through it all, he was still my son. The same Eli who once sat at the kitchen table doing homework, asking questions I couldn't answer, growing up faster than I could keep up with. A few weeks later, Eli invited me to the opening event for his nonprofit. I wasn't sure what to expect. He'd been working on it behind the scenes for months, and while I'd heard bits and pieces of what he was planning, seeing it come to life felt surreal. The event was at a local community center, a small space with old wood floors and flickering lights. It wasn't the sleek office buildings or the high-rise conference rooms I'd imagined when I first heard about his career in tech. It wasn't about prestige or appearances. It was about people coming together to support one another, to lift each other up. When I walked in, I was greeted by a crowd of people, many of them familiar faces from my shop, faces I hadn't seen in years. They were smiling, laughing, talking to each other like they had just found something they'd been missing. And in the middle of it all, Eli was standing, shaking hands and introducing himself to people with a calm confidence that made me swell with pride. I watched him from a distance for a while, seeing him in this new light. This wasn't just the kid I'd raised. This was a man, a leader, someone who had taken everything I had shown him and made it his own. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was there to help, to make sure people knew their worth, to show them that there was a way forward. As I walked up to him, he turned and smiled. "Dad, I'm so glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, my voice thick. "I'm proud of you, son." He put his arm around my shoulder and nodded. "This is just the beginning. We've got a lot of work to do, but I'm glad you're here with me. It wouldn't be the same without you." It was a small moment, but it was everything. It was the culmination of everything we had been through together. The struggles, the sacrifices, the quiet moments that built us into who we were. Eli had found his purpose, and in doing so he had given me one last lesson, that love and integrity would always win, and that, despite all the doubts and fears, I had raised him to be exactly who he was meant to be. A few months after the nonprofit had officially launched, I found myself reflecting more than I had in years. It was hard not to. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of the journey Eli and I had been on. The years of hard work, the challenges, the quiet sacrifices that shaped who we were, and now seeing where he was headed, it felt like everything had come full circle. It wasn't just that Eli had found his own way in life. He had found a way to bring others along with him, a way to lift people up. I had always tried to teach him the value of hard work, but now I could see that he understood something even deeper, that the value of a person isn't measured by the things they accumulate, but by the way they show up for others. And it was that understanding that was helping him change the lives of people who had long been overlooked. The first year of the nonprofit was a whirlwind. There were events, fundraisers, and more paperwork than anyone should have to deal with. But through it all, Eli was driven by something bigger than just making a difference. It was about creating lasting change, about giving people the tools they needed to help themselves. I often found myself stunned by how much he had accomplished. The quiet, introspective boy I had raised was now an advocate for working-class people everywhere, using the platform he had built to speak out on issues that affected those who worked in the shadows, unnoticed by society. He wasn't doing it for the praise or recognition. He was doing it because he believed it was the right thing to do. And because of that, people were listening. One afternoon, Eli called me with news I hadn't expected. "Dad, I've been offered a position," he said, his voice excited but hesitant. "A big one. It's with a company I've been working with for a while now. They want me to take a leadership role in their outreach program. The pay is great, and it's a huge opportunity for me." I sat up a little straighter, trying to process what he was saying. I had always known Eli had the potential to do big things, but I didn't expect this. "That's incredible, Eli," I said, though I could hear the doubt in my own voice. "But why now? You've got the nonprofit, you're doing so much good with that. Why would you want to leave all that behind?" He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, I could hear the conflict in his words. "I'm not leaving the nonprofit behind, Dad. The outreach program I'm being offered is all about helping people in the exact same way. It's just on a larger scale. I think it's a chance to reach even more people, to really have a bigger impact. But I'm struggling because I don't want you to think I'm abandoning the mission we've worked so hard for." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. This was a turning point, not just for him, but for both of us. I had spent years teaching him that family and integrity were the most important things. And now, he was standing at a crossroads, trying to figure out how to balance his work, his passion, and the lessons he had learned from me. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was his own man, and I had to let him make this choice on his own. "You're not abandoning anything, Eli," I said, my voice steady. "You've built something incredible, and if this new opportunity is the right thing for you, then you have to take it. The nonprofit is part of you, and that's not going anywhere. But sometimes the right move is to expand your reach, to take what you've learned and bring it to an even bigger stage. Whatever you decide, I'll be behind you." There was silence on the other end of the phone, and then Eli let out a small laugh. "You always know just what to say, Dad. Thanks for that. I'm still not sure, but I think I'm ready. I think this is the next step." "I know you are," I said, smiling as I thought about all the steps that had led him here. "Whatever happens, just remember what you've built, what you're still building. It's never just about one thing or another. It's about the people you help along the way. And you've always been about that." Over the next few days, Eli took the job offer, and I could tell it was the right decision for him. The more we talked about it, the more I realized that this new role wasn't an end. It was an extension of everything he'd already started. It was a way for him to amplify the work he was doing, to take the lessons he had learned from the nonprofit and apply them on a larger scale. I couldn't have been prouder of him if I tried. But as I watched him take this next step, I also realized something else. I had always feared that I hadn't done enough for him, that I hadn't given him the kind of life he deserved. But looking at him now, I knew that I had given him exactly what he needed. I had given him the example of hard work, the value of love, and the importance of integrity. And that was more than any degree or career could ever provide. The nonprofit continued to grow, and Eli's new role in the outreach program allowed him to bring even more people into the fold. He wasn't just using his skills to succeed, he was using them to make a difference. And I saw it. The man he had become, the man I always knew he could be. He wasn't just chasing success, he was chasing purpose. And in doing so, he was teaching me every day what it really meant to live a full, meaningful life. As time passed, I found myself at peace with the choices Eli had made. He had grown into a man who knew exactly what he stood for and wasn't afraid to make the tough decisions. And in that moment, I realized that my job as his father was done, not because I had stopped being there for him, but because he had learned the most important lesson I could ever give him. That the true measure of success isn't in what you achieve, but in how you make others feel and how you make a difference in the world. And as I looked at Eli, standing tall and confident in the life he had created, I knew that this was just the beginning for him. In life, true success isn't defined by wealth, status, or titles, but by the love you give and the impact you make on others. Hard work, integrity, and showing up every day for the people you care about are what truly matter. Don't measure your worth by what others think of you or by external achievements. Instead, focus on building genuine connections, lifting others up, and staying true to your values. The most fulfilling life is one where you prioritize character over accolades and find purpose in helping those around you. Real wealth comes from making a difference.